Coogs house. It's Houston. It's Rice. It's the Bayou Bucket. It's a rivalry that divides the city of Houston in so many ways. It's a classic. And this year, it's so classic that Rice is breaking out an old school offense for the occasion.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars, a daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today, as you do each and every day, as every day that you are. I want to get to the conversation in a second with what kind of a question you can answer. But today's show is brought to you by our folks over at Monarch Money. More fun on how to make sure you can making the most of your pocketbook later. I'm going to bring on Matt to talk all things Rice in a second. Before we get too far, Matt, I got a question for you. What's the best thing to eat out of a bucket?
Oh, I thought we were going with some sort of rice dish. Best thing to eat out of a bucket. Fried chicken? Is that like too Houston on the nose? Like what else? What else do you eat out of a bucket?
I feel like it's chicken or popcorn. I lean chicken.
Right?
Every time
Oh, this
there.
is true. Yeah, I'd go chicken.
I didn't want to do the rice thing and act like we're cook. I feel like that was too mean. Thank you so much for coming on today. We're going to talk some in the first segment about what Rice runs, what kind of things they're doing on offense look a lot different. Second, about the outlook of the teams, both teams this season, and kind of where the programs are at. Last but not least, we'll make some predictions and look at those fan duel lines. Matthew, triple option. I called this a classic matchup. That is old school football.
Well, that's what I think is so interesting is that you alluded to it. Rice has run the option before under Ken Hatfield, found a lot of success. But this is kind of a new spin on things. If you call it a triple option to head coach Scott Abel, he will correct you and tell you it's a gun option, which is really interesting because it's basically it's
Texas,
a meld.
In Texas, a gun option, that sounds a whole different kind of thing.
Well, you know, we're importing him from North Carolina, so we're bringing him in. But yeah, it's a mix of some triple option principles and some RPO, more modern offensive styles, kind of shifting that back and doing it out of the gun. And when you do that, it changes the angles, it changes the blocking, and it opens up a lot more speed into the offense. The triple option is probably less predicated on that and more on execution. This gets people moving east and west, and so far, positive results.
So I'm going to start off with what I've heard someone say, and I don't know that it's necessarily true because I do think he meant it pejoratively. But once upon a time, I coached the guy who'd coached at the Division I level for a while. He was coaching high school ball. I got to work with him; was great. But we're working a little private school, high academic school. He was saying he had found, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that the higher the GPA, the higher the 40 time. And I don't know how accurate that always is. I don't know that's totally fair. He said it, not me. But that would be counterintuitive to what you're saying about Rice and running a speed-based offense as opposed to an execution-based offense, right? It's worked for one game so far, though. So
it's both. It's both. I think that's what's interesting. So Scott Abel, his background came to Rice from Davidson, before that at Washington and Lee, two schools where basically nobody had ever won before. And he leaves as their most decorated coach of all time, highest winning percentage in school history, national or playoff bids, conference championships. When he was at Davidson, he led college football in rushing 5 out of the last 6 years. So this is not like they just found a guy, we'll try it out. No, he's done it, and he's done it really high. Well, he just hadn't done it at this level yet. So the question was, can you be creative? Can you do it at this level? We've seen schools have success with variants of the option in modern college football. Army won the American Conference last year with it. Liberty has been a playoff team or New Year's Six team with a variant of some of these option principles. So it's happened before. Just bring it to Rice now.
Well, and it's interesting because you mentioned a couple teams have done it recently. I'd almost argue it's probably easier, and I don't mean this negatively either, but to jumpstart this recently because you can build an option roster really fast with player movement, whereas before you'd have kind of had to like grandfather the old system out of the guys, right? Now you say come and say, hey, I'm running the option and I need these guys who hit the portal, and you go get option guys. Is Chase Jenkins at quarterback an option guy? Is he truly like this kind of offensive quarterback?
That is probably the most fascinating thing about all of this, because I think when Rice said we're hiring Abel, we're going to go run the option, I think people were generally aligned and saying, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. We think this is going to work. But the one thing that people didn't really fully buy into, and we'll talk about it, was can you do it in 2025? Like, can you do it in year one? Because, like you said, like I've talked every coaching search and every over the past couple years where they've thought about it, Rice has seriously considered, do we go hire the option? Do we go that way? When they hired Mike Bloomgren in 2018, the option was on the table. They talked about it. They decided no, and part of the reason was it's a multi-year transition in and transition out. If you're going to commit, that's a big piece. What's most impressive what Abel's done so far is the guys he's running with. He brought in a slot, Aaron Turner from Cincinnati, different offense, but other than him, all of the guys he's using were already on the roster. He's doing this with Rice's existing roster, which was running a West Coast scheme. So that's what makes it so interesting is he's really been able to. Every coach says, I'm going to do what the players do best, and we're going to utilize their skill sets. But you could argue few have done it this well.
Exactly. Old, for lack of a better phrase, old Rice guys on our lads, they highlight the colors like orange is a transfer and blue is a returner. And I had to take a triple take at like, is this really the most updated roster? Because on the two deep, they've only got two offensive players transferred in on offense, and on defense. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, at some point throughout the episode.
Yeah.
They've got a few more. I what was did you think that last year maybe you had an option offense? Do you wish you'd run this a year ago? Like, what does that mean?
It's so interesting because you look at, so first off, the offensive line, we'll start there because that's the most important piece if you're going to run this system. They're bringing back a returning center, which, schematically different, but same core function. They brought back a starting guard who's down almost 40 pounds from what he played at last year, but everybody else was in the system, but hadn't really ever played. So it's a bunch of redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores, kind of had a couple years in a college strength staff and a college strength program, but hadn't really been on the field yet. So basically said, okay, I got 15 linemen in this room. Can any of them do what I need them to do? And what's most interesting about this scheme is it's a lot more tailored, and how they put it together of where if you're going to be the swing side tackle or the split tackle, the tight tackle, you don't have to do everything. You just have to be really good at this block. So if you can, like, I'm dumbing it down very simplistically, but if you can find a guy that's really good at executing this particular aspect of the offense, I'm not saying you can fake an offensive line, but you don't have to have, these guys have been playing together for 3 years and they know each other like the back of their hand and they're all 300, 6'5". You can get away with it.
You absolutely can get away with it, and you don't have to like steamroll people either. I think it's a misconception about option football. I do think what's interesting about this is Houston plays Rice in week 2 in the Bayou Bucket. If this were a rivalry week November game, I think it looks dramatically different for both teams, frankly. And I want to get into that for a little bit. But before we get too far, I want to get into talking about Mazda, because Mazda is bringing you today's episode. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, whether that's a triple option drive or a kind of Wigman drive. And that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won more 2025 IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else. You can also feel the moment you get behind the wheel, smooth handling, intuitive controls, standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. I actually own a Mazda, for its worth. This is actually a fun one because it's the small details that make the big plays. And just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. As we look at this, There is only 1 week for either new program or either face of the new pro. Right, Connor Wigman and Houston look a lot different. New offense coordinator, new defense coordinator. Just Fritz's second year, a lot of new. Rice, we've mentioned all of the turnover in the like culture and style and whatever, but not a lot of player turnover, which is interesting. Uh, Does this game play out in an ugly way in week 2 in your mind because both teams still have a lot to figure out, or does Rice kind of feel like they know who they are?
I think that's what's most interesting about it is every coach that comes in talks about culture and talks about identity and you're like, okay, yeah, that's what you're supposed to say. But man, even like watching this first game, you don't want to get too bought into one sample size, but I really do think that this is a team that knows exactly who they are. And I don't say that lightly because you look at the offense and how it goes. There are some things that you go back and you rewatch the game, you look on film, you're like, okay, here you needed to make this read instead of that read, or here you should have pitched it when you kept it. And there's some like, X's and O's things that they can iron out. But like for the most part, you watch that game, like they get in on 4th and 1 with 90 seconds left, or they get one more first down after, some play calls that didn't go their way. These are ifs. I get it. But you're looking at like 19, 20 points a game. Like that's with this defense, like this is who Rice is. Like they're going to run the ball. They're going to play ball control football, an option team, and they're going to pound you on defense. And like that's what they said going into the year. This is who we're going to be. And that's exactly who they were in a game they were 2 touchdown underdogs in. So, like, as far as identity, I kind of buy that this is the team you're going to get. Now, how good are they at executing that identity? I think it remains to be seen, but I think they're more ahead of schedule than I ever really would have conceived they would have been.
So you mentioned that they were 2 touchdown underdogs against Louisiana Lafayette, and they ended up winning that game 14-12. Um, Talk us through, frankly, like that whole game week going into that game. Obviously, I'll cover it very thoroughly at the Roost for folks who want to go check out things on Rice across town. What was it? Kind of, okay, 2 touchdowns is way too much here. Did you have a feeling going in it would be closer than that? Did you have any idea what to expect? Did you think you're going to win?
I mean, we got to talk to these folks at FanDuel. I have no idea how you set a line for this game. I talked to people going in because, like, let's be real. Like, you have a brand new scheme and a brand new offense with a defense that, was top 5 in the American last year and returned enough pieces that was probably going to be top 5 in the American this year. Okay. But Louisiana, one of the best teams in the Sun Belt a year ago, turned over most of their roster, like new quarterback, all new skill players. Like, how I have no idea how they do it. But, so I don't know. It was hard to tell. I think there was always the belief that, and this is option football, right? Like if you're doing it the right way, it's a close game and you don't get behind schedule and this isn't a runaway. That's what is so interesting with these lines, because if everything goes according to plan for an option team, even if you're winning, it's a 1 or 2 score game when you get to the 4th quarter. And that's what makes these lines so difficult. So yeah, we'll call it 12 points, but this was a game where either the option worked and you ran it effectively and you were in the game or winning, or it didn't and you were down by 4 scores because you're playing catch up. And that's not where this offense is. So I guess you split the difference and you say this is either a close game or it's not, and we'll call it 14.
Well, and so last week, 55 rushes, 206 yards, no fumbles. You mentioned the occasional missed read, but is that about successful a week 1 that you could have with an option system first week of it?
100%. They did not put the ball on the ground. They had 3 and outs, but otherwise they moved the ball well and they executed. Like, that was everything you wanted it to be. You want more than 12 points, but
well,
or 14, but if we can nitpick, you'll take 14 if the other team gets 12.
Well, and I don't have time of possession in front of me, my stat sheet here, but
36 minutes, I believe.
I was about to say, I'd imagine with that many rushes, you're also dominating time of possession, keeping the other offense off the field. And it sounds like that's more or less how that played out. Obviously, this Saturday is a rivalry weekend for both programs in a very traditional sense. And I would argue that, there as recently as 2023, Rice did beat Houston, right? And that frankly, one of the big chunks of what got Dana Holgerson ultimately the axe was that he had too much talent to lose that game. Let's just be honest, right? And he did. He lost the game. As I look at it this year, it's early enough in the year that I think Houston can feel like they've practiced an option football ahead of them, right? It's not they've played last Thursday, extra couple days, etc. It's also early enough in the year, though, that I feel like Rice has probably had this one circled for a minute. Is this a big for a program in year one with a new head coach and all? Is this a thing that they've been talking about for a while around Rice?
I think it's really interesting. I asked Coach Abel about that at Media Day this week, and he just basically just kind of downplayed it and said, look, like, I'm in charge of getting our team ready to play whoever's on the other side of the ball on Saturday. This week it's Houston. He gets the significance of the game to this city, to these players, to the fan base. He understands that. But I don't know. I don't really get the sense that it's being blown too far out of proportion for where it was. I think in the previous staff, Mike Bloomgren was really clear that this game mattered, and it kind of mattered more than the other ones. And I'm not saying one approach is better or not. Mike Bloomgren did win the Bayou Bucket, so he has that going for him. But yeah, I don't think it's too far out of proportion for where they're at, because I think with a large degree, they're still playing with house money, right? Like, this was a team that, odds makers had winning three to four games this year, and they already have one, and it was one they weren't supposed to win. So if you lose this one, you're bummed. It stinks, but you still got to feel that you can hang with most of the rest of your schedule.
Well, and so they were. I think it was 3.5 was the games. You get Prairie View the week after Houston, right? So you got to feel pretty good about that one. You've got a couple of schools in the American.
Charlotte and UAB are both on the schedule.
Right. Like, you're going to hit the over, right? Like unless something big happens or fool's gold, Louisiana is not actually any good, you're going to hit the over. I guess my question is, does Houston weigh something amongst the guys? You mentioned Abel, new to the situation, very Belichickian in a positive way. I guess I should clarify after Monday night, but very Belichickian in his like.
Oh, it's going to lose its meaning very, very quickly, isn't it?
Yeah. Shouts to TCU, our Big 12 brethren, on that one. But it is feel like, hey, every game's a game. We're trying to win every whatever. But do the guys feel something? Because we talked in nauseum about Chase Jenkins. He's an A-Leaf kid, right? Like these kids are all from the same neighborhoods, the same schools, etc. This has to mean something to the guys, or are they also bought in on what Abel's saying?
I think both. I think obviously they care and they have an emotional connection more than Abel does. You look at guys like Dalen Alexander, who I talked to this week, who scored 3 touchdowns in the Bayou Bucket win in 2023. You can say as much as you want that it's just another game, but like, he remembers holding that trophy, and that's they like. There's a lot less trophies in college football than you would think. Like, unless you were going and playing in a playoff, at a famous bowl game that you've heard of, like, there's not a ton of trophies, especially in the South. Like, I feel like in the North, Big Ten, they give trophies away for every game, but in the South, there's not a ton of trophies. So if you can go add one to your locker room, I think that matters. And yeah, so I think everybody is on the same page of acknowledging that, like, we got to work the same way, but if we won this one, it would be kind of nice.
Well, and I want to guess the idea that it matters. I segueing into like the last bit here, talking about predictions for this week and mattering and so on. And as we alluded to before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, because NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for a kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That's in-game, live-action parlays. You can future picks, current picks, games that have already started picks all over the app. So whether you're new to the game or a veteran of making action more fun, head over to FanDuel. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app today by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Today's show is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, and whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table, and that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings you your entire financial situation all in one spot that is clean, easy to use. It's an interface that you can use on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. I teach, I coach, I podcast, I have a toddler, wife, the whole nine. Trust me, this one. If you put off organizing your finances in the past, Monarch is here for you. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally, feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. Now, you can maximize your earnings, make sure you're not spending too much on takeout, seeing where that money's going every month. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code Locked On College at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code Locked On College. Oh, that idea that it matters thing is important because Houston, unlike a lot of other Big 12 schools, does not really have, they're working on it, but a Big 12 rival, right? There's Iowa State,
I
Kansas
thought you were going to
State.
say a Big 12 roster, but sorry.
Whoa. Shots fired from across town. But what I really meant was that like there's the Iowa State, Kansas State, and Kansas State. Those are things that exist. Utah, BYU come in with a rivalry already there. Arizona State. Baylor, TCU have the blue bonnet, something that used
Y'all
to
are
be.
playing UCF for space now, right?
What I have been trying to
I think
drum up, though,
every Houston fan I've talked to has laughed that off too, which is probably the right answer.
but what I am trying to drum up though is like rivalries in college football are a real part of the fun, right? Like pro football, I guess like the Vikings and the Packers don't like each other, but that's more about the fans. The players, some of those guys went to the same schools together, right? Like
Mhm.
this is like college football, the guys actually have some of that rivalry on the field in a way that plays out just differently than it does in other levels of professional sports. And Rice is kind of all Houston's got. The Southwest Conference falling apart in '95 didn't help, obviously. But I feel like it, because Houston's got a little bit bigger athletic program right now, and people seem to forget the 2023 happened when you talk to them too much about it. There's been a couple years every now and then that people assume that, but that's not really, that's a rivalry in name. You're just both in the same They assume it's not the same kind of big deal here. When I almost think that the over-under being set on FanDuel at 39.5 implies like they kind of think there's going to be a little bit of a slugfest for part of this one, right?
Well, I think that's just you talk about an ethos of what a Willie Fritz coach team is, right? Like they're going to hit you in the mouth. Like that's the whole idea. We got the transfer quarterback and we got some skill players and they're working on the offense. Like I get that, but if Willie Fritz is going to do something, he's going to hit you in the mouth. And Rice has been good defensively. That's the one part of this that has worked over the last couple of years. So yeah, I get it, and I think something just on this rivalry in general that you know. I think what might get lost when you just look at, box scores and things like this is how much this game has mattered. And just look in the past, like 10 to 15 years, like winning aside, like who wins the game is important. But even in the near misses and things like that, like it's told a story. And like with both of the previous coaches that were employed here, you have Rice's near miss in 2022 that kind of was
Mhm.
warning signs that like, hey, something might be coming. They win in 23 and then they get steamrolled in 24. And we just see the whole cycle of both coaching staffs can somewhat trace their employment to how this game transpired beyond just the win and the loss there. Like it's a game that's mattered for both schools, which is not always the case.
2022 absolutely came up when 2023 happened. I remember people being like, "Oh, they act like they ran away from this last year. It took a fumble for a touchdown. Like that was part of the lore after the fact. I don't know that it was as front of mind before 2023. At least for a Houston Cougar fan, it felt more like a breathe easy kind of moment. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I think Houston wins. I don't think they win by the 2 touchdown spread that FanDuel has it at. I think that the gun option, right? Again, gun option makes me sound like I'm in an Old West movie, and in Texas, that's not.
You
a
can
movie
call
I'm
it
trying to
gun
be in.
choice. We're still it's workshopping it.
Gun choice is good. Gun choice is good.
This is his words, not mine.
I feel like that's a 2 touchdowns a lot for a team that I anticipate having the ball for a lot of minutes, regardless of how successful they are, just because they're going to use so much clock. I'm assuming you're going to say Rice has a better chance than that. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I would assume that as the guy covering the program, you see the positive more.
I'm really interested because what I want to know is, does the speed that Houston has on defense and the physicality they have on the trenches become an equalizer? Because I think what Louisiana had going for it is that's kind of where there was a chink in the chain and it didn't work. And Rice was able to have success there. So far, we're 1 game into this. And from what I've seen from the option is it is so much more the case of it works or it doesn't. And like, that's a really broad brush, but man, if you were just more physical and you can close the gap, it doesn't matter which one you're running to. So that's what I'm interested to see. Can Houston do that? I don't know. From what I saw against a talented Sunbelt team, I think it might be more challenging than not. So I'd probably take the under, but I get a bit nervous because I just think there's explosive plays in there for both sides. I think that, down to down, I think both of these defenses are really good. I do wonder whether or not we haven't really seen them tested from an explosive play ability. I think this offense has Rice does more explosive plays in it than we saw against Louisiana, just from a sheer reps standpoint. If you do this right enough times, you're gonna break a big one. It's just how it works. In the same ways, I've seen enough Connor Wigman to know it's in there. So do they hit a couple big ones?
If they hit a couple big ones early, because one of my complaints is they didn't connect on shots early against Stephen F. Austin. If Houston would have hit a couple big ones early, over the top to Kobe Young, Dean Connors, well known, I guess, by Rice, right? He breaks loose one time. Does Rice, and this may be too early in the process of the option game, and I'm sorry if it is, but does Rice have the ability to come back from down 14, 17 points, or does it snowball at that point?
We don't know.
Yeah.
I would tell you yes. So here's the thing. Chase Jenkins came in and he ran some similar schemes to this in high school, but he came in, he's been a West Coast offense for the past 2 years, switched to wide receiver last year, but has college reps at quarterback. I'm not going to tell you he's the most accurate passer in the world, but I've seen him throw the football and play in a traditional offense and do it well enough. He earned a scholarship in that offense. So I don't think that they're going to be as limited as a traditional, Army's down 14 and you just know it's not happening. But at the same time, they threw 4 passes beyond the line of scrimmage on Saturday. And it's really hard as a quarterback to say, hey, when you're volume shooting and you're going to throw 42 times or however much, these spread offenses are, if you miss on 3 of them, you're like, oops, I misfired. I'm going to have another shot. You might not get another shot in this offense. So it really is going to come down to, okay, here's the one play where you're going deep. Are you going to hit it?
I think that single opportunity thing is going to come up at either a blitzer on Houston's defense, or
it's going to swing it one way or another.
Ball. There's going to be, and it might be in the mid-second quarter because of the nature of catching up from behind in the option, right? It might not be a late fourth quarter kind of situation to be the deciding play, I do think this is going to be a competitive, fun one. And I think for the fun of the bucket, right? It's part of the fun of the rivalry. I don't think it's going to be the blowout that a year ago was. But Matthew, you've been covering Rice for a while. You've done a lot of work with the Roost. What do y'all have on the docket this week over at the Roost for the Bayou Bucket? What y'all got going?
Got game preview came up, talking notes and X factors and keys to the game. We got some practice notes coming. Got a Q&A with some folks over on the Houston side, the Scott Homewood podcast. Been friends for a long time, so there's always something going on. There's a lot going on. It's a big week. People were already excited, and you add a win to that fire, and people are even more interested.
That's Matthew Bartlett of the Roost, at the Roost. At the Roost on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it. That's Parker Ainsworth, host of Locked on Coogs. Thank you for making us first listen of the day, today, and every day. Be back tomorrow with more on Houston Rice and the Bayou Bucket this week. I do wrap up by saying go Coogs, Matt. I'm gonna make it go Coogs.